Story 1. The Abandoned Cabin in the Woods. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway. Sarah, Mark, Lisa, and James had been planning their trip to the cabin in the woods for months. The idea was to disconnect from the busy world, enjoy nature, and rekindle their old friendships. The cabin was remote, nestled deep within a dense forest, miles away from the nearest town. As they drove deeper into the forest, the trees grew thicker, blocking out the sunlight and casting long, eerie shadows across the narrow dirt road. The GPS signal had long vanished, and the only guide they had was a hand-drawn map provided by the cabin's owner. The further they drove, the more isolated they felt. Finally, they arrived. The cabin stood in a small clearing, old and weathered, with its wooden boards creaking in the wind. It looked abandoned, as if it hadn't been lived in for years. The windows were dirty, and the front porch sagged under its own weight. But what stood out the most were the strange carvings and symbols etched into the wooden walls. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with doubt as she stepped out of the car. "Yeah, this is it," Mark replied, holding up the map. "This place has seen better days, though." As they unpacked the car and made their way inside, an uneasy feeling settled over them. The air was heavy, and an oppressive silence enveloped the area. Inside, the cabin was just as old and dusty as the exterior. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the furniture was covered in a thick layer of dust. "This place gives me the creeps," Lisa whispered, glancing around nervously. James shrugged. "It's just an old cabin. We'll clean up a bit and it'll be fine." That first night, the sense of unease only grew. As they sat around the fireplace trying to relax, strange noises echoed through the forest outside. Twigs snapping, distant whispers, and the occasional rustle of leaves. It was as if the forest itself was alive and watching them. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with fear. "It's just the wind," James said, trying to sound reassuring. But deep down, he felt the same unease. Later, as they lay in their sleeping bags, the sounds grew louder. Mark swore he saw a figure standing among the trees, watching them with glowing eyes. But when he got up to check, there was nothing there. The next day, they decided to explore the area around the cabin. As they wandered through the forest, they stumbled upon an old, decrepit shed. Inside, they found an ancient journal, its pages yellowed with age. The journal belonged to a previous occupant of the cabin and detailed gruesome events that had taken place there. According to the journal, the cabin was cursed. It spoke of disappearances, blood rituals, and a malevolent entity that haunted the woods. The more they read, the more their fear grew. "This is insane," Mark said, slamming the journal shut. "It's just a bunch of old stories." "Then why do I feel like we're being watched?" Lisa asked, her voice trembling. As the day turned to night, the strange occurrences intensified. Doors opened and closed on their own, and they heard whispers coming from within the walls. Footsteps echoed through the cabin, though no one was there. Shadows moved in the corners of their vision, only to vanish when they turned to look. One night, Sarah woke up to find herself unable to move. She felt a heavy weight on her chest and saw a dark figure standing at the foot of her sleeping bag. It had no face, just a dark void where its features should have been. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. The figure slowly moved closer, its presence suffocating. Just as it reached out to touch her, she snapped awake, drenched in sweat. It had felt so real. The atmosphere in the cabin grew more oppressive with each passing day. Tension among the friends mounted as their fear escalated. They discovered bloodstains on the floorboards and strange, occult symbols painted on the walls. It was clear that something terrible had happened in the cabin, and they were not alone. One night, James went missing. They searched the cabin and the surrounding forest, but he was nowhere to be found. They found signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, deep scratches on the walls, and a trail of blood leading into the forest. Panic set in. They decided to leave, but when they tried to start the car, it wouldn't budge. The engine was dead and their phones had no signal. They were trapped, with no way to call for help. The nights grew longer and more terrifying. They felt the entity's presence growing stronger, as if it fed on their fear. It became bolder, attacking them physically. Sarah had deep scratches on her arms, and Lisa had bruises from being thrown against a wall by an unseen force. Desperate to survive, they decided to confront the entity. They gathered the items described in the journal for a ritual to banish it. As they began the ritual, the cabin shook violently. The air grew cold and the entity appeared, more terrifying than ever. It lashed out at them and they fought back with everything they had. The ritual room became a battleground. The entity's howls filled the air as the friends recited the incantations. The struggle was fierce, and the entity's power was overwhelming. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, the final words of the ritual were spoken. The entity let out a deafening scream and vanished into a cloud of darkness. The silence that followed was deafening. The cabin, once filled with the sounds of terror, was now eerily quiet. Mark and Sarah, the only survivors, staggered out of the cabin, their bodies battered and their minds scarred. They made their way back to civilization, forever haunted by the horrors they had faced. The cabin in the woods stood empty once more, waiting for its next victims. Story 2: The Haunted Beach Resort. Lily and Tom were excited about their romantic getaway to a secluded beach resort. They had found the resort online, and its pristine beaches and cozy bungalows promised the perfect escape from their hectic lives. However, the resort had a dark history that they were unaware of. Mysterious drownings and unexplained disappearances had plagued the area for years. The drive to the resort was long and winding, taking them through dense forests and along narrow coastal roads. As they approached the resort, the air grew colder, and an eerie fog rolled in from the ocean, shrouding the area in a ghostly mist. The resort was beautiful, with white sandy beaches stretching as far as the eye could see. But there was something off about the place. The staff seemed distant, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. Locals warned them to avoid the beach after dark, but they dismissed it as superstition. That evening, as they strolled along the beach, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and red. The ocean was calm, and the gentle waves lapped at their feet. They felt at peace, unaware of the horrors that awaited them. As night fell, the resort took on a different atmosphere. The fog thickened, and the air grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. They heard eerie singing coming from the ocean, a haunting melody that seemed to call out to them. Shadows moved on the beach, but when they looked closer, there was no one there. Back in their bungalow, they struggled to sleep. Strange noises filled the air, the sound of footsteps outside, whispers in the wind, and the occasional tap on their window. At one point, Lily woke up to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of their bed, but when she blinked, it was gone. The next day, they decided to explore the resort's history. In the library, they found old newspaper clippings detailing the resort's haunted past. The stories spoke of vengeful spirits of drowned victims seeking revenge. The most chilling account was of a bride who had drowned on her wedding day and whose ghost was said to haunt the beach, luring unsuspecting victims to their deaths. "This can't be real," Tom said, shivering as he read the articles. "Then why do the locals warn us to stay away from the beach at night?" Lily replied, her voice trembling. That night, the hauntings grew more intense. They saw ghostly apparitions on the beach, translucent figures of people who seemed to be searching for something. The singing grew louder, more insistent, as if calling them to the water. Lily saw a ghostly figure of a woman in a wedding dress standing at the edge of the ocean, beckoning to her. Tom experienced a terrifying encounter as well. He felt a cold hand grasp his ankle while he was in bed, pulling him towards the door. He fought back, breaking free just as he was about to be dragged outside. They both realized they were dealing with something beyond their understanding. Night. Objects moved on their own, doors slammed shut, and they heard disembodied voices whispering their names. They met other guests who had experienced similar hauntings and shared their stories of terror. Desperation set in as they realized they were trapped. Every attempt to leave the resort was thwarted by supernatural forces. Their car wouldn't start, and the path back to the main road was shrouded in a thick, impenetrable fog. Determined to survive, they delved deeper into the resort's history, hoping to find a way to break the curse. They discovered that the spirits were bound to the resort by a powerful ritual performed by a grieving widow who had lost her husband to the sea. To break the curse, they needed to perform a counter-ritual at the spot where the widow had performed hers. They gathered the necessary items for the ritual and headed to the beach at midnight. The ocean was eerily calm, and the air was thick with tension. As they began the ritual, the spirits emerged from the water, their ghostly forms glowing in the moonlight. The singing grew louder, more desperate. The spirits attacked, trying to stop them from completing the ritual. Lily and Tom fought back, chanting the incantations and holding the items tightly. The air crackled with energy as the ritual reached its climax. The spirits howled in fury, their forms twisting and contorting. Just as the final words were spoken, the spirits let out a deafening scream and vanished into the night. The beach fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The curse was broken, but at a great cost. Lily and Tom were exhausted, their bodies bruised and their minds scarred. They packed their belongings and left the resort at dawn, vowing never to return. As they drove away, they looked back one last time, seeing the resort bathed in the soft light of the morning sun. The horrors they had faced would haunt them forever, but they were free. Story 3. The Cursed Road Trip. John, Emily, Mike, and Rachel were thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts. They decided to embark on a road trip to explore haunted locations and document their experiences for their YouTube channel. Their first destination was an abandoned ghost town known for its dark history. The drive was filled with excitement and anticipation. They had researched the ghost town extensively and were eager to capture evidence of the paranormal. As they approached the town, the atmosphere grew heavy with a sense of foreboding. The ghost town was a chilling sight. Dilapidated buildings stood in eerie silence, their windows broken and doors hanging off their hinges. The air was still, and the only sound was the crunch of their footsteps on the gravel. As they explored, they experienced mild paranormal activity. Shadowy figures appeared in the windows, and they heard whispers and footsteps in the empty buildings. They captured some footage, but nothing too intense. Little did they know, this was just the beginning. Their next stop was a haunted motel known for strange disappearances. The motel was a relic from the 1950s, with peeling paint and a run-down sign that flickered ominously. The owner, an elderly man with a haunted look in his eyes, warned them about the motel's dark history. That night, the paranormal activity intensified. They heard voices calling their names, saw ghostly apparitions in the hallways, and experienced cold spots that chilled them to the bone. At one point, Emily felt a cold hand touch her shoulder, but when she turned around, no one was there. Their third destination was a deserted amusement park rumored to be cursed. The park was a nightmare landscape of twisted rides, overgrown pathways, and faded signs. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of dread. As they explored the park, they were separated by a dense fog that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Each of them encountered terrifying entities, a ghostly clown that chased Mike through the funhouse, spectral children that giggled and whispered in Rachel's ear, and a dark figure that stalked John and Emily. They noticed a pattern of increasing danger with each location. The hauntings were becoming more intense and violent. They began to suspect that they were being followed by a malevolent spirit, one that had attached itself to them during their first stop in the ghost town. As they delved deeper into their research, they discovered that the spirit was released during their first stop and had been following them ever since. The spirit was vengeful, seeking to punish anyone who disturbed its resting place. Mike started acting strangely, as if possessed by the spirit. His behavior became erratic and violent, and his appearance changed. Dark circles under his eyes, a pallor to his skin, and a cold, distant look in his eyes. Desperate to break the curse, they decided to revisit the ghost town. They found a ritual in their research that could cleanse the spirit and send it back to where it came from. But performing the ritual would be dangerous, and they would have to face the spirit head-on. They gathered the necessary items and returned to the ghost town at midnight. The town was even more oppressive than before, and the air was thick with a malevolent presence. As they began the ritual, the spirit appeared, more terrifying than ever. The spirit attacked, trying to stop them from completing the ritual. The friends fought back, chanting the incantations and holding the ritual items tightly. The air crackled with energy as the spirit howled in fury, its form twisting and contorting. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, the final words of the ritual were spoken. The spirit let out a deafening scream and vanished into the night. The town fell silent, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The curse was broken, but at a great cost. The friends were exhausted, their bodies bruised and their minds scarred. They packed their belongings and left the ghost town at dawn, vowing never to return. As they drove away, they looked back one last time, seeing the town bathed in the soft light of the morning sun. The horrors they had faced would haunt them forever, but they were free.